If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evan, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by my good friend Khalid Muhammad from Command 11, affectionately known in-house at Survival Dispatch News as 008. Directly below him, my good friend Randy Nance back home in Texas, combat wounded Green Beret, all-around great guy. Kind of a 006, but that's not official just yet. And directly below me, my good friend Jeff MD, 26-year CIA operative, author extraordinaire, actor extraordinaire in the Surviving Man series, by the way. He gets all dressed up, but he puts like a white shirt on with a tie, looks all official, and he gives CIA briefs to the competitors on Surviving Man. It's very official, you know. And 007, by the way, just in case anybody's wondering what his handle
I have to give it to him, though, you know, as he sent a picture to all of us this morning. Jeff took out a snake this morning in his house, Rattler. So,
boy, howdy.
What is that?
A good. How long? I was going to say,
because he eats the vermin, so I just took him down to the wash and let him go.
A good 6-footer, I would say, by the look of it.
I think break your leg, guaranteed.
But he was curled up right under my bird feeder, and so he was smart, man. He knows they're going to come in. So stupid.
All right, so now we can add survival with poisonous snakes to the Survival Dispatch News repertoire. All right, so tonight we're on our next episode of the Long Road series. If memory serves me right, this is episode 20 out of 144 that we have mapped out. Just want to reiterate that we designed every single episode in this series to stand on its own. You don't have to watch them all. You don't have to watch them in order. You can watch them in a different order. You can watch ones you want to watch and miss other ones. It doesn't matter, but each one stands on its own. So tonight, the topic at hand is when the authorities can't be trusted. And there's multiple aspects to this, whether it be people in DC who've been bought off and, are doing us great harm to our country, right down to imposters during a terrorist attack wearing first responder uniforms. So the theme essentially tonight is we have compromised officials. For example, why do we not have a counterterrorism specialist in charge of counterterrorism? Why do we have an academic like Sebastian Gorka in place who wants to tell us that we should keep paying the Taliban? I did a little bit more research on this, by the way, guys. $87 million a week is what we're giving the Taliban. One bucket alone is $40 million a week for them to pledge to keep Al-Qaeda and ISIS contained, but they dress their own guys up as Al-Qaeda and ISIS, send them into Pakistan to commit terrorist acts. When they come back to Afghanistan, they kill them, their own guys, and then they say to Sebastian Gorka, see, we're protecting you. We killed those bad guys from Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Send us another $87 million, please. So in addition to that, we've massive DHS failures, of course, under, Obama's third term, old Biden, for lack of a better term, as well as bad actors. And, at the end of the day, these complex coordinated terrorist attacks have already started around the world. We know that it's a harbinger of things to come here in America. So the question is, who do you trust when the cops are gone, first responders are overwhelmed, and all because the intel for 9/11 2.0 is being ignored at the top? Because my best guess, I don't have any concrete proof of this, but my best guess is Donald Trump wants a minimum of one Nobel Peace Prize, preferably two, so that he can best Barack Obama. He wants to go down in history as the peace president. So I do know from people that I know who work in the White House, it's been communicated that people need to do everything possible to help Donald Trump win these Nobel Peace Prizes and go down as the president of peace. anyways, we're going to get into it deep tonight. So let's move over to our conflicted question of the night before we get going. And I got to get everybody on stage here. There we go. All right. So conflictedthegame.com. These are 14 card decks of questions set in post-apocalyptic scenarios. Almost all of them have some element of morality attached to them, hence the name Conflicted. I'm going to read off tonight's question. We're going to answer it at the end of tonight's podcast. And we want to see your answers either in the live chat or down below in the comment section. So you run into someone who in the past made some personal sacrifices in order to help you get on your feet during a financial struggle. Now society is completely collapsed and he comes to your door begging for help. To give him the bare minimum that he needs, your resources would be depleted by 50%, and you don't know if and when you'll be able to replenish your supplies. Would you be able to do for him what he did for you by giving him half of your supplies? So that's a good one for sure. Let's move right into the first news item. We've got, I think, maybe half a dozen news items that we're going to cover before we dive into the main topic. First one goes to Khalid here. Surprise, surprise. Bomb threats at Atlanta hospitals deemed to be swatting. Atlanta and Sandy Springs police investigated bomb threats at two Emory Hospital locations on September 5th, 2025, which were deemed unfounded. The incidents are believed to be swatting calls targeting Metro Atlanta hospitals. No threats were found. So, Khalid, I mean, let me get everybody on stage over on this one as well. I know what's going on here, but go ahead and explain it to the audience.
We've been over this a few times about how they're going to test responses. We got this Atlanta hospital thing from the media, and we took a look at it. We went, yeah, this is the same thing over and over. If you look back at that map that we made of all the swatting and all of the hoaxes, a lot of that is centered around Atlanta. A lot of it, and a couple of those swatting calls happened during the NRA convention in Atlanta, which was quite surprising because you've got all those gun owners. You're running swatting calls and you're running hoaxes when you've got the entire NRA membership sitting in Atlanta at the same time. You've got to be careful of this stuff, though, because every time you put this out, you're creating fear in somebody's mind that, you know, this is happening, this is happening. You've got to explain it with some kind of detail. You can't just call it swatting. You have to explain why it's happening and why you cannot be hesitant about going to a hospital now. We get a bunch of emails at Command 11 from people that watch the podcast asking, you know, I've got a flight on this date. Should I take my flight or not? We're going, listen, everything's fine. You can fly. We'll let you know when you have to worry. There are no issues. This is all just, you know, hoaxes and problems that people are trying to create. These are all bad actors playing a game to figure out what responses are, what's going to happen, who's going to respond. I think a lot of the law enforcement has figured out that these are swatting calls, but the problem is you can't leave it wide open. You can't just not respond, because if, God forbid, it's for real, then it's a major issue. So every time they do this, they're watching to see what the response is. They're watching to see what routes the law enforcement's taking to come in. Whatever you may be thinking, understand this is a trial and error period for the terrorists. This is dry runs. They are testing everything right now. Final cities have not been decided. We know roughly which way they're headed, what parts of the country they're headed towards. These things in Atlanta, if you go back and look at our old threat list, you'll find Atlanta appears many times in our threat list. From hoaxes to swatting calls to calls to schools about bombs. Atlanta has been targeted, so is Raleigh-Durham, so is Minnesota. Just keep an eye on what's going on. Don't get overexcited about it.
Yeah, appreciate that. Great explanation, Khalid. So I moved to the next one for Randy here. And it's pretty straightforward. So which of these two immigrants got wall-to-wall sympathetic news coverage from the media? So on the left, we have this young girl who came here as a Ukrainian war refugee, sitting on a subway on a train in Charlotte, minding her own business. And a black guy who 14 times has been arrested for doing violent things in public to other people, decided to stand up behind her and stab her repeatedly in the neck and kill her. And she did absolutely nothing to deserve this, of course, but she's the wrong color. She's white. So the media is not going to cover this at all. Whereas we got the shitbag on the other side, who we know 100% involved in child sex trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking, that clown from Connecticut went and had margaritas with him in a prison in El Salvador. And I think it was Boasberg, the activist judge, ordered him brought back to America. Just a complete piece of shit. He's now being sent to some country in South Africa, just above the nation of South Africa, I should say, called Eswatini, I believe, if I'm getting that correct. But Randy, take it away. I mean, my watch just went off already on this one. This one's just crazy.
Well, it's just what we've been talking about on a certain plane for all the time we've been talking about this too. You know what I mean? It's the bias of the media. I mean, it couldn't be more sickening than looking at these two cases, right? And what, the girl's 23 years old, just got out of Ukraine, probably barely survived all that, come here, and apparently she just finished a shift working at her job. And now she's on the subway or the bus, whatever it was, on her way home. And this guy just, for no reason, apparently, that anybody can discern of, just got up and stabbed her to death, I guess because she was white. But, that's the problem. She's white, so there is no coverage of it whatsoever. And that's what we see a theme of in the media right now. If it had been the other way around, if that had been a white guy killing a black woman or a black anybody or even a brown person,
can you imagine?
We would still be watching it on the news. It would not be gone yet. There would be 1,000 stories already.
We'd be watching it for a year. But did you see the judges who let him go 14 times?
14.
Every last one of them is a DEI hire. I swear to God.
I saw the last one. Yes, there's a black female judge. Yep.
This guy has a criminal record a mile long. How do you justify letting him out? We need legislation, to be quite frank, that holds these judges accountable for this shit.
Well, we touched on it last week. You know what I mean? It's because the Democrats have lost everything. As we all, anybody, it doesn't take, it's not me and Randy saying so. This is something that's pretty common knowledge now, that they are in the tank, right? They have the lowest approval rating they've ever had of any political party in this country ever. So, as we mentioned last week, the only thing they have left is violence, right? The Democrats, the only thing they have left to help push their stuff is violence and all this other stuff that we see going on. And this case lends to it. Here we've had this whole, I don't know, was it 2 or 3 months now that they've been talking about this Abreu guy, right? 2 or 3 months. It's constantly on the news. We had politicians waste our money. Hopefully we eventually made them pay for that themselves, as you mentioned, to go over to Venezuela. One of them even had margaritas. El Salvador. But the problem is, do you see anybody come in to say anything for her? Now, I get it, but she is an immigrant. But I guess because she didn't come here illegally, right, and she's white, that it's not newsworthy.
Bingo. Check this out too today. I'm not sure if it's been completely zapped yet or not. Let me zoom in so it's not so much of an eye test. So this is a Wikipedia article on the killing of her. An editor has nominated this article for deletion. They're trying to memory hole it already. Yeah. I mean, it's unforgivable stuff. So anyway, moving on to the next one here for Jeff from our friend Sarah Adams. U.S. government is still lying about a current member of the Syrian Ministry of Defense linked to the New Orleans New Year's Day bombing. Anything so they can parade terrorist Abu Muhammad al-Giuliani on U.S. soil to appease their Muslim Brotherhood political funders. And this is a Syrian Ministry of Defense ad that was recently released. And of course, Giuliani, former Al-Qaeda, spun off one of the first branches of ISIS. And now he's been installed as the head of Syria. And he's coming here September 25th to the UN to address us. Unbelievable. I'm just going to play a portion of this and then I'll pivot to you, Jeff. By the way, those look like 1950s and 1960s fighter planes to me.
Yeah, those are a bit dated.
So anyway, the whole thing goes on and on. It's essentially a recruiting video for them. So Jeff, love to hear your thoughts on Syria.
Well, you know, it's that he's a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch. No, he's just a son of a bitch. You know, I think there's a point where we've got to say, you know, you got to quit holding your nose and going forward with some of the stuff. Sometimes you need to say, sometimes that pile of shit is just a pile of shit, and scrape it off your shoe. And I think he's one of the types that we need to do that with. You know, I don't know about the Trump chasing a Nobel Peace Prize, blah, 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 but you can't install a monster and then expect him not to act like a monster.
Yep.
You know, a rabid dog.
Well, I mean, it's no big secret
dog,
that
no matter how many times you pat it on the head.
it's no big secret that the Trump admin has specifically said that they think they can buy their way to peace. That's why the money's going to the Taliban. That's why all the support's going to Giuliani. Trump even tapped our friend General Paul Vallely to be his main guy to go over there and establish a port so that we can conduct commerce and rebuild their country. And Khalid and I discussed it. If General Vallely goes over there, they will assassinate him. There's all kinds of death threats been put on him for years. He was 71 years old in 2012 and marched a force of 400 troops into Aleppo. This is the guy who was an Army Ranger, ended up being the first spec op soldier ever to become a general. Anyway, long story short is it's a shitstorm. We'll leave it at that. Move on to the next one here. So I got 3 here for you, Khalid. They're all related, so I'm going to go through them fairly quickly and then let you comment on them. But eyewitness claims Jerusalem terror attack. Reports say the bus driver stopped at the station, got out, gathered his things, got on his phone, and disappeared just before the terrorists entered the bus and shot passengers at point blank range. A man on a bike allegedly arrived early to film the incident. All of this is unconfirmed and based on initial witness reports. And this, I believe, was from yesterday. I'm going to play a portion of this video, then I'll move to the second and third one.
שלום. מה את יכולה לספר? הייתי באוטובוס 62, אני הייתי באוטובוס, האוטו היה מפוצץ.
So I'm actually going to stop it there because there's no sub headlines, but it gives you an idea of the aftermath here. Next one up, this is aerial view. Breaking: 2 terrorists entered a bus station in Jerusalem with automatic weapons. Around 20 people shot. 4 have been killed, including children. I believe that death count has gone up, and Khalid can confirm that. And then here's the last one. DAS cam footage shows the moment 2 Palestinian Muslims shot up a bus stop in Israel today, murdering 6 people and injuring 21 others. And some of you want to give these terrorist demons a state. I will never for the life of me understand how someone can sympathize with these depraved savages. 1 minute and 7 seconds long. Those are the first shots. Second shots. Third round of shots. Fourth round of shots. Fifth round of shots. Now we're into full auto. I'm letting it play because there's a few more shots here that wrap it up at the end. So there's 2 reasons that we put this in the brief for tonight. And the first reason is obviously it's a terrorist attack, and we want to give an update on terrorist attacks. The other part to this is this long war series that we've mapped out. So essentially 12 story arcs with 12 episodes each, 144 total episodes. This is episode number 20, is that when 9/11 2.0 happens, which will be an order of magnitude worse than 9/11 1.0 was, this is what we have to look forward to. It's not going to be a one and done like 9/11 1.0 was, with an extended period of quiet, because we left the front door open for 4 years and invited all of these terrorists into the country. And if you're not aware of the numbers from the Biden DHS, they admit to releasing 200,000 SIAs into our country. And SIA is a special interest alien. And the only way to become a special interest alien is either be a terrorist or be associated with a terrorist organization. And this is not going to be, this is going to be a very radical change. Patriot Act 2.0 is going to make Patriot Act 1.0 look like a citation for, you know, jaywalking sort of thing.
Yeah.
But go ahead and take it away on this one, Khalid.
Look, here's your problem. Israel has suffered with this for a long time. I mean, it's not like terrorist attacks have ended in Israel at any point in time. And Hamas keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. Whether it be Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad or whoever, whichever color group you want to talk about, these attacks have gone on and on and on and on. Part of the problem is the people of Palestine are split. You've got normal people who are being held hostage by Hamas. And then you've got Hamasiites that say the only way to get freedom, the only way to get a state is by fighting with Israel. Well, that's a great idea, but you know, you can't fight a force that's much stronger than you are. And these little attacks just kick your cause backwards, kick your cause backwards, kick your cause backwards, because Hamas just yesterday issued a statement saying that we've agreed to Donald Trump's conditions, and we're ready to sit down at the negotiating table. We're ready to hand over the Palestinian state to a third party, not us, not the Palestinian Authority. Someone else come in and run Gaza, run the West Bank, give our people peace, which is all bullshit. Excuse my French, but Hamas is never going to give up on Gaza. They are never going to give up because Iran needs Gaza, just like they need Lebanon. Now, if you look at the other side of the coin, Lebanon's going through the same thing. Lebanon's army, Lebanon's government has decided to disarm the Hezbollah. They've activated the army to do so. You've got mass resignations of Shia politicians, Shia government members who are siding with Hezbollah. You've got Israel cornered with the Iranian state. And the only way you're going to get peace in the Middle East is by taking out Iran. And a lot of my Pakistani friends may have a problem with me saying that, but Iran's never been a friend of Pakistan. Whether you guys want to play, you know, they're our buddies and we should support them, they've never been a friend to us. The Balochistan Liberation Army is fully supported by Iran. They are housed in Iran. They are not our friends. Taking the mullah regime out in Iran will bring peace across the entire region, whether you like it or not. Now, to the second part of your statement, the number of terrorists in the United States right now is differing between 25, 30, 35,000 terrorists that are there. Part of that will be used in the first wave of 9/11 2.0. Part of them will be used in continuing attacks, because once the attacks start, they will not stop. Because once your law enforcement collapses, once your government goes into a police state or into a security state, you're going to have repeated attacks, repeated attacks, repeated attacks, repeated attacks. So what you're seeing in Israel, what you see in Pakistan is what is going to happen in the US, because we've lived with it. Since 2007, we have not had a day of peace in Pakistan. Not one day of peace in Pakistan, because these terrorists who are trained in Afghanistan are coming here and carrying out attacks and testing out their methods here, then going to Europe, and then going to the US. So what you're seeing is a taste of what's coming to the US.
Yeah, unfortunate for sure. So next one, Randy, we've been talking about this. You and I have been talking about this, you know, from DFW being home for both of us. And let me read through this because this is pretty interesting. So this is a girl, by the way, in Plano, northwest corner of Dallas, close to Irving, of course, which was taken over 20 years ago by radical Muslims. But and this Brianna Morello, by the way, was a Fox News reporter for years, but she's been an independent news reporter, I think, for 10 years now. Back in July, a Middle Eastern man followed me while I was walking my dog. He snuck up behind me and entered my apartment complex. After I repeatedly told him to leave, he became coming up. He was coming up the stairs and towards me. Leave it at that. He only left after he allegedly saw a black pistol. Police questioned me about a potential firearm, and I refused to answer without an attorney. He has not been criminally charged. Plano PD waited weeks to investigate, even after I pleaded with them to ID him. Obtaining the surveillance footage was a fight. I had to threaten to sue the city and police department. They only investigated him after I posted about the incident on social media, and it received over 2 million views. He admitted to following me down the streets and not leaving the property because he thought I was attractive and he wanted to speak to me. He is also engaged. In my opinion, he only left the property because he feared he saw a pistol. Monsters think it's open season on women out there. We need to begin correcting this issue before more women lose their lives. How many more white women need to be targeted in this country before we realize we have a major issue of minority men coming after us? 1 minute long. I'm going to play the entire video. So this is her, of course, walking her dog. This shitbag follows fairly closely behind her. And keep in mind, this part of DFW has been overrun with radical Islamic guys who want to essentially take over Texas because they know if Texas fails, Texas falls, the nation falls. So now he follows her into her apartment building, and she's telling him to get lost. He continues to follow her up the stairs, and she's telling him, get lost. So he continues on following her up the stairs, and then very hastily makes an exit here. And the reason he made that exit is because she pulled her pistol to conceal weapon permit. And basically it took that to get this guy to leave her alone. So next one up, there's a article from Sarah Adams. Oh, sorry, that's not related to that. I thought it was. My bad. So, Randy, I'm going to come to you on this. I mean, this doesn't surprise me. This is the same shit that's been going on in Great Britain for how many years now?
Well, quite a few, to the point now it's out of control. And, and then we also notice they're doing the same thing over there that we saw during 2020, right? The police weren't really arresting the criminals. They're arresting the folks that try to defend themselves or their property. And, we saw this last week. And the picture we had last week was right when he's coming in the door. And you take a look at the look on that guy's face, right when he walks in the door, and you can tell he is up to no good. He's not there to try to meet her and to date her. That's not why he is there. And, I find it curious because it doesn't say in that article, who called the cops? Was it her or him? Because it sounds like it was him, because then the cops asked her about the gun. And how would they know that if she called them? You see, so it seems like this guy's using the law against us in a way because he knows what he was doing. But then when she pulled out a gun, that's illegal. You cannot just pull out and brandish a weapon, which shouldn't be illegal, but I understand why they've made it illegal. So the fact is, he had to have told them because she didn't know who he was. So even if she called the cops, how would they have found him to get that information? Certainly this quick with that one video. Yeah. And you noticed as he's walking, she goes to the door. When he knows she's going to the door, he picks up his pace. So he's able to make it there before the door closes. This guy was up to no good. And,
so actually,
lucky he didn't get shot.
I was right. The second article from the second article from Sarah does apply. I misread that a couple seconds ago. Okay. It's related to this topic of the girl in Plano. A few months ago, we had a security incident aboard a plane that sounded like classic casing. The individual was a Saudi national. Law enforcement brushed it off as flirting. They're far too complacent. Their guard is down, and they're not proactive at a time when vigilance should be the top priority. So Brianna had made this post, and this is earlier this morning. Reminder, the Plano police officer that responded to my call and wrote the police report brushed off the incident by saying the man was trying to flirt with her. I asked Plano PD to correct the report on August 29th. So just a bad situation in that part of the Metroplex for sure. So moving on to the next one for Jeff here. Maduro is forcing Venezuelan fishermen to accompany TDA fentanyl traffickers along their routes, serving as human shields. Maduro's Bolivian militia is a violation of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas. 49 seconds.
Esas familias que son ejemplos, que cuidan a la patria como un templo y se desploman esos intentos. Ya no hay colonia, el perfume huele a gloria y la carroña en su lamento. No puede y agradezco cada sacrificio de cada compatriota que no serán de desquicio, el que quiere tragarse hasta el último resquicio de riqueza y que ambiciona lo que está bajo del piso. Qué mal que hizo los cálculos el pato.
So I'm going to leave it there. That communicates the purpose of it. You can see this is one of their Navy boats here, surrounded by fishermen. Typical scumbag move for terrorists and the like. Jeff, your thoughts on all this stuff going on with Venezuela?
Well, I think it basically kind of proves what Trump said all along, that TDA is basically subservient to the Venezuelan government or is a part of it. And when you have, if this was someone blasting a narco boat out of the water and you weren't in with the narcos, you'd be going, oh, well, too bad, don't be a narco. But instead, he's buzzing our ships with F-16s. He's sending patrol ships out to escort them. That just tells me that he's trying to protect his people and his assets. And, blow them out of the water. I have no problem with it. As far as the innocent fishermen go, you just wait till they get out to sea. They're going to have to meet up with the mothership to transfer the cargo. And when they do, you take them both out.
So you guys can probably correct me on this. I know Khalid's been following it, but we have a super loyal follower in, Puerto Rico? Nestor Diaz. And he's been sending our signal group. We have a private signal group for anybody who signs up as a Survival Dispatch Guardian. You just go to survivaldispatch.news. That's our Substack. Sign up for a free account. You get daily sit reps. You get all of JJ Morris's instructional videos. You get our Saturday watch guide, so on and so forth. And if you pay $7.99 a month or $74.99 a year, you get 2.5 months for free. You get the sources to our sit reps. You get an invite to our super busy signal chat. The volume of intel that is shared there, we never anticipated it was going to take off like this. So Nestor is a good example. He's been sharing firsthand pictures that he's been taking of what we're doing there, what our military is doing there. We're not talking the pictures that have been sanitized by the legacy media. And we are ramping things up quickly. So I don't see how this ends well for Maduro at all. I think he's up a creek without a paddle, shit's creek without a paddle. And we appreciate Nestor, by the way, and sharing all the information. He's got more information than that, and we'll share it over the next couple of days. I didn't have a chance to get it into today's brief, but we're running some very interesting drills in his area.
Yeah, drills is a good word.
Yeah, drills. Well, that's actually the way I'm stealing from him again. Actually, before we get into the main topic, Khalid, can you bring us up to speed on Sarah's new book or white paper that's coming out on Thursday?
Yeah, 9/11. Sarah's releasing the Hamza bin Laden story. Not just Hamza, but other terrorists who the U.S. has claimed they have killed with drone strikes and with bomb blasts and whatever and whatnot. Sarah is going to blow the lid off of a lot of things. And look, it's about time people figured out that we're not being told the truth. And Hamza still being alive, Anna still being alive. You have a terrorism consortium running in Afghanistan. I did a post today calling it the University of Terrorism. And you're letting it go. And the problem is, by letting it go, you are putting the entire world at risk. By saying that these people are dead, you're just closing your eyes and saying, oh, I don't see them. It's like that little kid who walks into the living room naked with his eyes covered saying, you can't see me. That's what the US government is doing right now, going, oh, we can't see you. Whatever you're doing, we can't see you. And the problem is that you cannot run a counterterrorism strategy like that. What you're doing in Syria, what you're doing in Mogadishu, what you're doing in Somalia, what you're doing in Afghanistan, which is the center of all of this. This is not how counterterrorism is done. You're just giving them an opening to do what they want.
When did MI6 break the news that Hamza bin Laden was alive? Because there's been a bunch of pictures of him out in public in Afghanistan since.
Yeah.
But when did MI6 announce? It's been a couple of years, isn't it?
MI6 turned on the US. They turned on the CIA. The CIA begged and pleaded MI6 not to confirm it. And I think it was the Daily Mail or the Times that ran the story in the UK saying Hamza bin Laden is still alive. And they ran pictures as well. And I think it was like a year and a half, 18 months, two years ago, something like that. And the US has been ticked off at MI6 for that since that you guys confirmed this, because CIA will not confirm it. They even went to the extent, I'll give you this one as well. They brought out a spokesperson and put them on Sean Ryan's show to discredit Sarah and say, well, we have no proof that Hamza's really alive. This is just conjecture. And we all went, come on, are you kidding? You've never had anything to do with the Laden desk. You've never had anything to do with the Al-Qaeda desk, and you're going to tell us that Sarah's wrong? Come on.
Well, the pictures have, I mean, he's been seen out in public. You know, it's a big FU to us.
Oh, no, he's there. He's there. I mean, anyone who's been into Afghanistan knows that Hamza's alive.
By the way, congratulations, Khalid. You are now batting 2 for 2. We just got kicked off of Facebook. I don't know what you said this time, but you've got us kicked off twice now. Congratulations. Good job.
Let's go for 3.
Tomorrow night, let's go for number 3. See if we can.
Apparently, Facebook is firmly in the Hamza is dead camp. So, you know.
I mean, must be, right? So, the link that I just threw out there a couple minutes ago and all the live chats, I mean, we're broadcasting 8 platforms. As Khalid got us kicked off Facebook again. The link is to Sarah's new white paper / book that's coming out on Thursday, and it's a good read. Y'all need to check that out. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag on something here. So, Khalid, Mike Glover, and I, Sarah Adams, Jane Doe, a bunch of people have been working on a new project headed up by Mike Glover called Dead Drop with Mike Glover. So a dead drop, if you think back to the movie in the late 90s called Conspiracy Theory, where Mel Gibson played the neurotic guy who used to send a newsletter out to people, that's a dead drop, right? It's something that's in dead tree format, usually, not always, sometimes a USB key. And, it's a way of passing intel to other people that's untraceable and typically gets destroyed afterwards. We don't even have any content up, period. And Khalid will tell you, as soon as we hit the button to start this publication, people started subscribing to it without us even telling everybody, hey, by the way, this is a Mike Glover project with all these other people underneath it. This is coming really, really soon on Substack. We don't even have paying memberships on it. We already have people hitting that pledge button to send money to support this. So you're going to have a collection of the premier open source intelligence agents and closed source in some instances imminently starting. We've got a great crew, Ryan Geho as well, that we've had on Survival Dispatch News. We've got another guy, Matt, who worked with Mike Glover, Green Beret, as well as CIA. This is where all the intelligence is going to be. It's not a Survival Dispatch News thing. I'm not an intelligence expert. These guys are experts in their field, and I'm just the ringleader, for lack of a better term. But this is going to be really interesting because the information that comes out of this is going to knock your socks off. I literally got Mike's first article for it minutes before we went live, and it's outstanding stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into tonight's topic. Let me get us back on the other stage here. All right. So now that that's out of the way, basically, again, we're talking about compromised officials but some of them elected. We all know that these Congress critters should be wearing, NASCAR style jerseys, so we know who's paying their way, especially Big Pharma. The Department of Homeland Security failures over the 4 years of the Biden admin, bad actors, imposters, the whole 9 yards. And the concept of these complex coordinated terrorist attacks are already happening. They started even prior to 2008 in Mumbai, but have picked up steam since then. And part of this is, if you haven't viewed the other episodes, as I said, each one of these stands on its own. The tactics these guys use is they attack somewhere and then they sit and wait for the first responders to show up, and then they attack the first responders. And while that cell's doing that, there's 3 other cells of 2 or 3 or 4 ISIS guys attacking another location. But the first one is to draw people in for that secondary attack. And that's why we keep telling you, God forbid, but if you're on the X during anything like this, get out of Dodge. Distance equals safety. Don't hang around, and don't automatically assume everybody you see in a first responder uniform is legit. We've had a rash of break-ins at dry cleaners across the country, stealing uniforms, police uniforms, as well as EMT and paramedic uniforms. We've had multiple break-ins at National Guard armories, I should say, many of which you look at it and you go, well, yeah, this isn't good, but it's like $3,000 was stolen, $3,000 worth of equipment or assets. And then you read it, the $3,000 is National Guard uniforms. So don't trust anybody after the first thing goes off. Just get out of Dodge. And, unless you can verify somebody's who they say they are, look at their footwear, look at their belt. If they have a duty belt on, for example, and don't have things like a taser, maybe even some pepper spray, handcuffs, all of the things you would see on a regular law enforcement officer, probably fake. They may not be wearing matching footwear. They may be wearing something like sneakers that they shouldn't be wearing. Have a close look at the badges. They're not as easy to counterfeit, and they're not as easily stolen. So here we go. Segment 1. We're going to open up with intelligence failures, just like we had prior to 9/11 1.0. We will eventually be doing a very in-depth episode or two on 9/11 1.0. I'm not saying that I agree 100% with the official account or not. There's some things that I think are kind of fishy. There's some things that the guys here, will weigh in on at that point in time. So let's not go down that rabbit hole. And we will talk about the intelligence failures that we know of, though, right? So essentially, here we are again. The same thing's, going to happen again. Doing the same thing, expecting different results. Einstein's theory of insanity, right? So you have institutions that are sworn to protect us have failed. Just look at what the DHS and everything that rolls up under the DHS did during the Biden installation. It's criminal. So we're going to break down how intelligence agencies are repeating the same catastrophic failures led to 9/11 1.0 and what that means for all of us collectively. So a few quick points here, and then I'm going to go straight to Khalid. We've got former CIA officers raising alarms about ignored ISIS and Al-Qaeda intelligence that's being dismissed for political reasons. There's a ton of intelligence showing that we are facing the Islamic Army now. The Islamic Army is a coalition of every radical Islamic terrorist group out there. They're not fighting amongst each other anymore. They've combined forces. Intelligence agencies are being restructured with political loyalists, Sebastian Gorka, for example, rather than seasoned counterterrorism professionals. Warning systems that worked before 9/11 are being dismantled or deprioritized in favor of domestic political targeting. You heard that right. That was a old Biden thing, and now it's carrying on into the Trump admin. Unbelievable. I'm a strong Trump supporter, and I'm just astonished at how poorly some of his people are vetted once again. We've got foreign terrorist organizations exploiting known vulnerabilities in our compromised response systems. They have access to everything, just everything. Some of them actually brag about it. So power grid, which we're going to get deep into tomorrow night, data networks, cell phone networks, water treatment plants, and the list goes on. All of that stuff has been compromised across the board. Resource allocations is being diverted from legitimate counterterrorism to politically motivated investigations. The same dangerous assumptions that blinded officials before 10/7 are now showing up in our intelligence. Information sharing between agencies is broken down due to politicization and territorial disputes. Get this into you. The standard protocol for your city, if you live in a city, is that your city is given directions by the county. The county gets their instructions from the state gets their instructions from the feds when it comes to any type of disaster, whether it's man-made or natural, okay? And the feds are passing on no information that we know that they have. All of the sheriffs here, almost all the sheriffs in Florida, which would be 68, have been briefed by Sarah Adams and are taking this threat very, very seriously. Outside of Florida, it's a hodgepodge of people. So Khalid and I and Ryan Geho and Keith Graves have been working with this one particular agency, and the guy's running into a brick wall. He says, my chief doesn't believe it because if the feds aren't sharing it with us, it can't be true. And that's the type of sabotage that we're focusing on here tonight. And again, you have these threat assessments being overruled by political appointees who completely lack security experience. Tom Barrack, our ambassador to Syria in that area, Sebastian Gorka. I mean, these guys should have never been put in these positions. So I'm going to get off the soapbox and turn it over to you guys. Khalid, go ahead and take it away with your high-level overviews, and then I have some specific questions for all three of you.
Okay, let's start off with the administration. Sebastian Gorka is an academic. He's never seen a battlefield in his entire life. He couldn't recognize a terrorist if he ever saw one. Then you tie in Zalmay Khalilzad, who was the ambassador to Afghanistan in the last Trump government and negotiated the Doha Accords, who's writing articles in the Washington Post saying that the Taliban can't be a permanent enemy. I mean, can you believe that he's writing articles in the Washington Post saying that Taliban cannot be a permanent enemy? Then you've got what's going on in the FBI, where you have got literally the number of arrests that have been made of terrorists by the FBI since the Trump administration came to power has been more on the entrapment side than it's been actually tracking terrorists. So you've got your three divisions there. Then you turn around, you look at the TSA, where they've disarmed all of your federal air marshals. They cannot carry a weapon anymore, which means you are defenseless in the air. If a terrorist were to pull a weapon, put on a suicide jacket, and stand up and say he's going to blow himself up, before your federal air marshal would have a gun on him, he could shoot him, and end of story. Now they don't have that anymore. They're glorified air hostesses, air marshals now. Add to that, I think the last TSA report that came out, there were 144 violations of TSA code inside of airports inside the United States. And of the 144, 71 have been investigated. The rest is still pending. And we are standing on the brink of what is probably one of the worst terrorist attacks that will happen in the United States. A lot of people are saying that, we could have. We could have doesn't matter. What Biden did with Obama's help to the U.S. has made the U.S. an open target. You have got well over 400,000 special interest aliens in the U.S. If you remember the show we did with J.J. Carroll, we both agreed on that. It's 500,000 terrorists that are in the U.S. right now that were released on Joe Biden and the White House's orders that let them into the U.S. The number of terrorists that have been released in Europe is just unbelievable. Now the Home Minister, what would be the U.S.'s version of the Secretary of State, is now a Muslim Brotherhood aligned Pakistani Muslim. And we are so proud to see that, because if you go back and listen to her statements, you will know flat out she is Muslim Brotherhood. So Muslim Brotherhood has been able to establish its power inside the ranks of every administration from Europe to the U.S., and they have penetrated DHS, they have penetrated FBI, they have penetrated TSA, they have penetrated the CIA. The fact the CIA is not willing to admit the fact that there are terrorists on U.S. soil, that's a huge problem. Because as this is September 11th all over again. You were getting reports of suspicious behavior to the FBI, to the CIA, and no one's saying, oh, this could potentially happen. This could potentially happen. Let's go investigate. We're back in that same position right now. And this is why I keep saying, this is September 10th, 2001. Nothing can happen in America. We are the greatest country in the world. And then the planes hit the towers. And we are in the exact same position we are right now.
Thanks, Clete. So, Randy, I got a couple of very specific questions for you here. First one is I'd like to hear your opinion on how the politicization of intelligence agency is affecting their core mission, which is to protect America and Americans.
Well, we could just look at, our past history, right? We now know that most likely we had intelligence that Pearl Harbor was going to happen. Mm-hmm. However, the administration in charge at the time and the rest of the officials wanted and desperately needed into the World War II. But Americans were against it. So they knew if something happened that we would be for it. And of course, Pearl Harbor happened. And, then millions of men walked down and signed up the next day. Same thing with September 11th. And we won't go down that rabbit hole, but I will say that I've noticed even Tucker Carlson is now going to do, and I think it started, a 5-part series on September 11th and how the current story is false. All of it, every last bit of it, he says. So we'll see. But that being said, if we did allow it, why would that be? Well, the Patriot Act needed signed and several other things, and then we went on this big jihad. What people don't realize is when that first happened, the Bush administration and all the officials then were like locked in. Let's go hit Iraq. And I think it was Colin Powell, right? Was the one that told, hey, look, y'all do that, you're going to ruin all credibility because we just told them it was bin Laden out of Afghanistan and the Taliban that did this. So if we roll into Iraq and we don't go do something about Afghanistan, we're going to lose the public, which he's probably right. So my point to all that is when we have our officials, including administrations and other officials that are in these positions of power and public trust, decide that they need something else done, they're more than willing to turn their back and look the other way while something happens to us, because then they know we will get on board with whatever they wanted to begin with. And that is the problem with
gaslighting.
That's exactly right. And when you politicize our federal agencies, that's what happens. Because I think we can all agree, really, political matters only matter so much. The fact of the matter is, as far as us living our daily lives and all that other stuff, political stuff shouldn't even hit the bottom of the ground where the rubber meets the road. But you see that today all the way from the top to right down to the ground. And as he mentioned earlier, because the feds aren't saying this may be a possibility, when they brought it to some locals, we're not going to pay attention to that because the feds say it isn't true and it's not happening. And there again, that is when they lose that core mission of protecting Americans. And then they put something else more important over that.
Yeah. So second question for you, Randy, before we go to Jeff is, and it's related to exactly what you were just touching on, is what role does bureaucratic resistance play when career professionals try to warn about legitimate threats but end up with their hands being tied?
Well, we're watching it. We've been watching it since 2020 and long before that, really since 2016, right? It's all that gaslighting. So what you look at is when that's resistance. Right now, what we see in America, the truth is not told. You have to go dig it out and discover it and find it and pull it out somewhere. And that is what that does. So what we're looking at when they don't tell the truth or when they turn their back and look the other way and let something happen, that is where that resistance comes in, and then like he just said, my example at the end of the other one, then when you do bring it to some local officials and then they go look at their feeds and they go ask the people above them and some of the feds and they're like, nope, not here. Then they're not going to do anything about it. And they're going to completely brush you off, which is what we're watching right now with Sarah, Khalid, and all this information that they've been trying to tell for the last 2 years. And none of the federal agencies want to hear about it. So that is where we find the problem. And when you have people that are willing to do that, you have to get them out. We have to root those folks out, fire them, put them in jail if that's necessary, or I mean, if it's warranted. If they've committed crimes, then we need to charge them. But it doesn't look like we're doing any of that on any level.
It doesn't. And, so Khalid and I have been dealing with this on a daily basis, where somebody comes forward from a law enforcement agency, a hospital, and they ask for more information. So we give them some information that maybe hasn't been put out there in the public. We make sure we connect all the right people in group emails and stuff. And they come back a day or two later and say, yeah, I took it to my superiors, and they don't believe it, and they're not going to do anything about it. And some of these places, like the hospitals, I'm not going to name the hospital, but 158 points of entry. Most of them don't even have security cameras monitoring those points of entry. And it's a complete security disaster in that particular hospital. And when the person stepped up and said, hey, we should be doing something about this, the guy who said no comes from the Middle East. He's a Muslim who came from the Middle East, who drives a Lamborghini truck, who had a special decal made to go across the back of his Lamborghini truck that says Free Palestine.
Yeah.
So
and that's a perfect example. That's a perfect example.
Take that for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Insanity.
Yeah.
So Jeff, apologies for the long go around there. And you were active duty CIA prior to 9/11 1.0. I'm curious if any specific parallels stand out to you that you see between the current intelligence failures and the warning signs that preceded 9/11 1.0.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. And it's basically the powers that be ignoring credible threat information.
Yeah.
We saw it in Phoenix prior to 9/11, and you had an FBI, female FBI agent was investigating. Someone had come to her and said, we've got a Middle Eastern man taking flight training, and all he wants to do is know how to land. I mean, know how to take off. He doesn't want to know how to land. And she says, whoa, this is a little troubling, concerning. And they quashed it. I think she got reprimanded when she pushed it. We had plenty of warning on 9/11. We had people in Atlanta coming forward saying stuff. The one, and even afterwards, the one that reminded me was a guy got a phone call at like 2 a.m. on 9/11. And it was like some Middle Eastern man saying the operation is a go, the operation is a go, and he hung up. Well, the guy was just some white guy from Georgia, and he didn't know what it was. And until 9/11 happened, then he went, oh, holy shit. And so he talked to his local cop. Local cop called the phone company, and in light of what was going on, they all cooperated. The call had come from a phone number in Minnesota. So he got them to pull the phone records for all the outgoing calls from that phone number, the one that had called him, and it called 5 others. And one of them was his phone number with the last 2 numbers transposed. So they just fat fingered it and hit him, I said. And so here's someone who obviously had prior knowledge of 9/11. And this guy had wrapped it up, gave it as, got it as far as he could, and basically handed it to the FBI. They didn't do anything with it. And they would go to these people, and they went to their house and said, did you get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning on 9/11? No, I didn't. Okay. They didn't ask, did anyone else in the house get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah.
They didn't. And it was and the person whose house it was worked as an airplane cleaner at Hartsfield International Airport. And they were getting prior knowledge. Someone in that house got a call saying, hey, the operation is a go. The operation is a go. So, yeah, there was plenty of stuff that just didn't get investigated. Now, a lot of it was they were overwhelmed, but I mean, that would move to the top of the pile for me.
Yeah,
But,
I would think so.
and I don't want to rip on the FBI. There's a lot of good people in the FBI. But when it comes to counterterrorism stuff, and I saw it after 9/11, they got into this. They never seem to make an arrest except for cases that they themselves created. They'd find some disgruntled 16-year-old on the internet, chat him up in a chat room, convince him to go blow something up, sell him some fake explosives, and then arrest him. And it's like, this is a crime that you created just so
Yeah.
you can solve it. And the reason they do it is it's easier. You have complete control. There's no, you're not going to get any curveballs. Nothing's going to come out of left field. You run it from start, and then you make a big splash. You make an arrest. You get on TV. We're doing our job. Because real investigative work, sometimes you spend a lot of time and it turns out it's nothing. Or you spend a lot of time and the guy knows that you're onto him and he skips town or leaves the country, and you're disrupting, but you don't get headlines for disrupting. You get headlines for arrests. And it's just like with Waco, the ATF did that raid at that time on the compound in Waco because they had a budget hearing coming up and they were trying to get their budget increased, and they wanted a big splashy arrest for Congress. And it blew up in their face, but that was the reason behind that. That's why they raided the compound instead of arresting David Koresh when he went jogging every day. They have different priorities, and solving crime isn't necessarily one of them.
Yeah, that one didn't work out too well for him.
No, it did not. I was there. I was in Texas when all that came down. I believe me. I was there for Oklahoma City bombing. I was there for the Waco raid. Yeah.
I was 15 minutes away, sitting in a restaurant having lunch with my Uncle Bob when it happened. And so they flashed it up on the TV in the restaurant, and then we come out of the parking lot. We could see the smoke, and of course the smell was horrendous. There's anybody who hasn't smelt burning humans. It's a pretty distinct smell, and it's not good. So I got one more question for you before we move on to segment 2, Jeff, is give me an example of what effective intelligence warning would look like versus what's going on right now in this 9/11 2.0 stuff.
Well, an effective one, I think, would be more like, they have a lead, they investigate it, they put, they get surveillance on them, they get wiretaps on their phones, they do what you normally would think of as a standard investigation, and either they investigate the guy and catch him red-handed, or they have enough that they say, okay, he hasn't done anything illegal yet, we're confident that he's planning it, and then if nothing else, you pick him up and deport his ass if he's foreign. You disrupt it. Now, you may not get the big splash, but the point is you disrupt the terrorist attack and you save lives. And it's not going to be, these guys are going to attack tomorrow at the Piggly Wiggly. That's not what happens. If you do it right, nothing ever happens at the Piggly Wiggly. No one ever hears about it because a good law enforcement operation, especially counterterrorism, is like a good intelligence op. You do it right, no one hears about it.
Yeah. So last question. What do you do when that guy is a Maryland man?
A real Maryland man, or
well, you put his ass in jail.
Well,
you can disrupt them just by them knowing that you're onto them. Yeah. They're going to change their plans.
Yeah.
I'm referring to the scumbag TDA guy in Maryland who went to El Salvador. We brought him back. Now he's going to Africa. I know I'm just explaining for the audience. And the legacy mainstream media always refers to him as the Maryland man. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's a good example of why we can't trust them. Another good example of why we can't trust them. All right. Moving on to segment number 2. This is the collapse of law enforcement during 9/11. 2.0, basically the thin blue line breaks. And we're going to look at this from the perspective of the local level. You've got police departments hemorrhaging officers still faster than they can hire replacements, with major cities missing many thousands of law enforcement officers. So when Keith Graves was still traveling, training agencies as of last year, most agencies were functioning at somewhere around the 50-60% of where they should be for head count. The odd one might have been as high as 80%, but most of them were in that 50 to 60% range, which is why you see all these stories of, oh, you had a break-in, you had stuff stolen. Yeah, that's too bad. We're not going to respond to that because we don't have enough resources to do it. It's all direct fallout from, the defund the police stuff. If you're a Guardian member, there's a link on my OneDrive where you can download all kinds of stuff that we create for our episodes. One of them is a spreadsheet that we created that looks at policing levels before 2020 and after 2020. And then the other caveat to that is the post 2020 cops are not up to par. Very few are up to par. So most of them are like, the Acorn cop here in Florida. They're not trained. They're not proficient. So when we lose a pre 2020 cop and replace them with a post 2020 cop, it's not the same thing. It's nowhere near the amount of effectiveness there. So New York, for example, I ran some numbers quickly. That spreadsheet, by the way, is on my OneDrive for subscribers. New York City is short over 10,000 officers, while they've got increasing terrorist threats. There was a bomb threat a couple weeks ago downtown Times Square. They emptied the whole thing. We've mentioned it before. It was a great exercise for the terrorists to probe and find out what the SOP is. So, how long did it take the cops to show up? What direction did they come from? Where did people leave the immediate area? Where did they exfil to? And they made notes of the whole thing. So if they do end up at some point in time bombing Times Square, they know exactly what's going to happen, as far as the law enforcement response is concerned. In addition to New York City, of course, you've got Chicago, Philadelphia, LA. All of them are missing many thousands of officers. And again, a good portion of their force are post 2020 cops. And I'm not saying 100% of post 2020 cops are bad. What I am saying is the vast majority of them are undertrained and underskilled, and they're not a good replacement for the guys who left because they said, you know what, you guys, you hated us, you hated on us, you encouraged violence against us. F you, take your job, shove it up your ass. I don't blame them. I do the same thing myself. You've got entire small police forces, like small rural departments, that have been completely disbanded. And that leaves just some coverage to the sheriff's office, which in turn is understaffed as well. So there's a lot of people. I've seen response times for something that's an emergency as bad as 1 hour. I mean, you're long dead. 8 minutes these days is considered, you're doing really good with your response time. 8 minutes, you're DRT. If you don't have a gun, you're not able to defend yourself, you're dead right there. This political hostility towards law enforcement is still accelerating all of this, by the way. Just because Trump's in office, that doesn't change Minneapolis, that doesn't change Chicago, that doesn't change California. All of those places are still extremely hostile towards cops. It's a thankless job where you put your life on the line, and God forbid that you do anything that might alter the SOP and you end up in jail, for crying out loud. By the way, the training standards for those officers, it's not just me saying they're not up to par. They had to lower the training standards because nobody wanted the frickin' jobs. So the people who showed up couldn't meet the previous standards. So the only way to accomplish it was say, well, we'll just drop the threshold as far as what the capabilities need to be. And that's how you end up with many people wearing a badge and gun that should not have it. My wife and I watched one last night where there was this guy called the cops because there was somebody renting a room from him that he wanted removed from his property. And this is a big old boy. He's like 6'6", 300 pounds at least. And it just went downhill. And you had all these post-2020 cops. It was quite obvious they were post-2020 cops. And they almost got their ass kicked by this guy. And they tased him 3 times. It didn't even faze him. He's like, yeah, whatever, And one of the cops ended up having to shoot him and killed him and so on and so forth. Nobody should be put in that situation. But these guys, they weren't up to par. Let's just leave it at that. You also got all. Say again?
Germany, over 50% of new recruits for German police need remedial German language training.
Yep. In Germany.
I mean, you just tweaked me. So on the weekend, there was a Met UK cop who's a Muslim who was offended by somebody saying something that was pro-Britain, okay? Like, God bless the Queen or something to that effect.
Yep.
And when the guy said, well, what are you arresting me for? The cop said, well, I'm a Muslim and you offended me. And under section, whatever, you've caused me distress by saying that. So, I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but Keir Starmer early released 3,000 hardened criminals last year out of the British penal system to make room for people who posted something on social media that hurt somebody's feelings or caused them anxiety or, you know, whatever. It's bizarro world. It's just crazy. And the end result of all of this, by the way, cutting the budgets back and everything, is officer morale is at historic lows in most places. Now it's pretty decent here in Florida because we weren't part of that whole bandwagon, but it's pretty bad across the rest of the country. So Khalid, go ahead and speak to the thin blue line collapsing and how, you know, they were attacked in Mumbai and Paris, and what that looks like for us here if 10 to 15 cities are attacked simultaneously.
Well, I'm going to pick up from where Jeff was talking about how intelligence operations run, because every police department has an intelligence department. A good intelligence, look, you don't go into intelligence to get the applause or get the headlines. That's not why you become an intelligence operative. I mean, Chris, you and I have had a lot of conversations about the different kinds of things we do at Command 11, but you never see it on our website. You never see it on our X handle. We don't do it for the applause. It's something we do to protect people, and it's done, it's over, and we move on. If you're doing it for your budget, or if you're doing it for the headlines, then you're in the wrong business, dude. You need to find another business to go into other than policing or intelligence. Now, when you roll that over into what's happening with the police force, BLM was probably the worst thing that could have ever happened to policing in the United States, because you made the police, for the first time in the history of America, you made the police the enemy of the citizens. And you made the people afraid of their own police forces. If we grew up with policemen, I mean, I spent 27 years in the US. I knew my county sheriff. I knew sheriff's deputies. I knew police officers. I knew the police chief. Personally knew them because they were always out and about. They'd come to the games. They'd be at the football games. They'd be at the baseball games. We all knew who they were. Now, during the whole BLM crap, you turned them into our enemies. So people automatically went disconnect. And they said, well, we can't trust the police because, look, they're so violent. They're so this. You have to understand, violence only happens when they are faced with violence. If you get stopped on the road and you don't pull a gun, then a cop isn't going to pull a gun. But if you pull a gun on a police officer, he naturally reactions to pull a weapon on you as well. And what happens after that is between you and the person who's pulled the weapon. The problem that you've got is that because of the whole woke and the whole, and I call it the demasculinization of men, you have turned America into a sissy state. Your police officer. Yeah, well, I didn't want to go that way.
I've been saying that since the 1990s, the pussification of America.
You have turned America into a bunch of wimps. I mean, America used to be a country of men. And that's how everyone looked at it. America was red-blooded American men. And they could stand up and defend a woman. They could stand up when something was being done that was wrong. And they would stand up and raise their voice for that. Now, men will fold their hands and go, oh, I shouldn't say anything. Oh, I shouldn't get involved because, you know, something might happen. That has rolled into your law enforcement. The fact that you have to lower standards, the fact that you now cannot trust your police officers. We watched videos of cops being beaten up in New York by criminals. 4 police officers would go respond to a call, and all of them would get their asses kicked. And at the end of the day, they'd have to, all of them have pulled tasers and fire on the criminal just to get them down and put the handcuffs on them. I mean, is this where we've gotten to? And the problem is the enemy that's coming at you now is not questioning their masculinity. They are coming at you with full force. They have been trained as a military. They are going to attack with every bit of fiber in their soul. Again, I'm going to bring you back to Pakistan. We have seen it here. Our police forces have been slowly raising the standard because of terrorism. We've been raising our standard for police officers because of terrorism. The idea of someone being able to make a phone call, how it used to happen in Pakistan, and Jeff, I think you might know this. In Pakistan, you used to be able to a wealthy or influential person used to pick up the phone, call a police chief, and say, well, my nephew needs a job. And he'd be posted in the police department. That no longer exists because now we are fighting an enemy that is much better trained, much better in a fitness form that you cannot, put the fat guy out there and say, okay, here's a gun, here's a belt, and go and fight terrorism. He's dead on the spot. We've seen our standards go up while America's standard has come down. And we're all going, wait a minute, that was the standard we were trying to achieve, what the American police force was. And now you guys are coming down and we're going up. And we've been fighting this now for almost 27 years. And you guys are just getting ready to fight it. And your police force is not ready to handle what's coming. Not at all.
Yeah, well said. Randy, I got a couple of very specific questions for you on this. I want to hear your opinion on how current staffing levels will affect our ability to respond to these multiple complex coordinated attacks, whether it's law enforcement or paramedic like you were.
Well, we'll just talk about the law enforcement, right? Because really what you've said, you've touched on, but you got to realize too, you know what I mean? That, which I've said, and we've said many times on here, people have to realize the people that are pulling the strings that are actually making this happen, they're very smart people.
Mm-hmm.
They're very smart people, and they have all the money. So they have the smartest people on the planet working for them. That's why you see this working so well, like the insertion of BLM during 2020, right? That all leads us to right here where we are today. And the one thing that Clee didn't mention, he kind of somewhat did, but specifically, it's not just that now law enforcement is also afraid to do their job. Now, if you're white, they have nothing to fear. But if they are now trying to, do their job with someone of color, they have to be very careful because they might go to jail for doing their job, as we watched over the last few years. And so that is what the problem is. And then when you start talking about, so it led to where we are perfectly, because first you have to erode the trust, right? And it was already eroded with law enforcement because we've had several issues in America, with some law enforcement, certainly out in New York City and some other places. However, for the most part, we still had a really good law enforcement, right? That was one of the biggest differences of America than every other country on the planet. And Khalid can attest to this. Our police force used to be a police force. And I know some people that, nothing's ever going to be perfect. So I'm not trying to sit here and say they were perfect all the way through. I'm just saying we had a law enforcement that did their job and they were disciplined. And now we've stripped that away to where all the good guys went ahead and left and retired early, retired when they should, or got another job. And now when you look at the staffing, what you're talking about in this particular question, and then when you start taking, let's say, less desirable candidates, and I think somebody back here in the thread somewhere that was law enforcement said they're now even taking people that were felons, right? People have to understand, if you're going to now, and I get it, felons deserve a second chance, but not in law enforcement. If you were a convicted felon, you don't get to be in law enforcement after that for obvious reasons. But here we are lowering the standards. What happens when you lower the standards? Well, we're watching it in real time right now. You have law enforcement that seems complacent, right? Or, heck, not really that involved. The people that we have in law enforcement, their jobs now are, I don't know how to describe it actually, but, when you erode a system like that for a specific reason, and that's what this appears to be, the next steps, or you have less people, and then you also have less quality people, right? And so we all know what that looks like. Let's just take a sports team for a fact. If all of a sudden, any one of those teams in the pros, and it doesn't matter what sport it is, already, started bringing in people that aren't the best, right, at that position. And, you will see a decline in their performance. Certainly when they come up to another team that everybody in that position earned that spot, you know what I mean? And then also do their jobs accordingly because they care about their job. What we're looking at is now, I think that we're halfway to having Mexico's police force. Really, seriously, that's how compromised it is. That's how non-caring those folks are at this point. And you can't, to some degree, we can't blame them, right? Because again, as I mentioned, we just watched over the last 10 years what's happened to law enforcement in the news and the media. And as Khalid pointed out, they were turned into the bad guys. And so, what is going to happen at that point? I mean, it's predictable. There is no other outcome possible when you start hiring people that are less qualified, people that care less, or let's just say don't give a shit, right? They don't care at all, really. They just want a paycheck and it doesn't really matter. And when you start hiring people that are less qualified and less caring and going on down the list of that, it doesn't matter what entity that is, the performance and their efficiency goes way, way down. And that's what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, good comments. Thanks. Appreciate it, Randy.
Yeah.
Jeff, moving to you here. Just to speculate, how long would it, and I know the answer to this, but I'm pretty sure I know where you're going with it, but I want to have our audience hear it directly from you. How long would it realistically take to get meaningful help during these complex coordinated attacks?
You mean like local level?
Yeah. Like, so you're on the X, you're aware that one of the attacks is in these complex coordinated attacks. How long is it going to take you to get meaningful help from law enforcement and paramedics?
No, as an individual, you're probably
Yes.
not, because they're going to have their hands full.
That's where I was going.
Yeah, you are your own first responder, and in that situation, you are your only first responder, because the needs of one person are not going to trump what's going on in the community. Yeah, they're going to be like, some old lady calls up and say someone's breaking into my house, and cops are probably just going to shoot them and call us tomorrow. Yeah, I wouldn't count on the police even answering the damn phone once this thing kicks off.
Or if they're in Canada, they can just be told to sit there and take their beating.
Yeah, and leave your door unlocked, put the keys, your car keys right there on the hook next to the door.
And take the beating and don't dare raise a hand against the criminal or we'll charge you with assault, basically. Because he was just looking for a better life, and he's going to contribute tremendously to our society. He's probably a doctor, maybe an astronaut.
He's a Maryland man. He's just a Maryland man.
He's a Maryland man. Exactly. Last question for you, and then we'll move on to segment 3. What role do you think constitutional sheriffs play in filling the gaps left by failed municipal departments below them and failed state departments above them? Because as we've mentioned many times, the sheriff has way, way, way more power than many Americans realize.
Well, one thing sheriffs can do, which police departments really can't, is they can deputize people. They can organize a posse. They can go into the community and pick out 10, 12, 15 former military guys and say, and if they agree to it, say, you're now on my team. Here's your badge. Swear an oath. You don't see local police being able to do that. You don't see the highway patrol or state police being able to do that, but sheriffs can. So they can expand their force rapidly if they have to.
Yeah, great answer, Jeff. I would expect no less from you. So let's move to segment 3, federal agency failures. So think DHS, FEMA, where they've been putting political agendas over public safety. And this is not just for terrorist related stuff. Look at the gong show that Hurricane Helene was in West North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. A great example. Our good friend, Doc Pete Chambers, who's running for governor of Texas, had a team there within days. And I asked him multiple times throughout their assistance there, how much is this is private individuals like yourself versus the government? And he said 95% private, 5% from the government. Now, of course, there were politics involved with the old Biden admin, didn't want to help people who don't vote for him, but that's a whole other story. So normally if you had something local or even county where it failed as a law enforcement or agency, that the states and the federal agencies supposedly are to get involved and help in these catastrophic failures. And let's just talk for a little bit here. We'll make this section fairly quick, though, on failures that are being caused by politics. So, for example, FEMA recently terminated dozens of IT employees after massive cybersecurity failures exposed the entire department. This has been going on for God knows how long. And, you know, these people were so incompetent, not changing default passwords on switches and routers and those sort of things, allowing third parties like Volt Typhoon, which is a big Chinese hacking group, to infiltrate us. DHS just recently has shifted the focus from counterterrorism back to politically motivated domestic surveillance operations. This is back to the bullshit that we saw under the Biden admin, saying that middle-aged white guys were the problem. I'm telling you right now, if we were the problem, you would know it. You know, to say that we're the problem is just a slap in the face and a total crock of bullshit. And the only people who parrot that crap are either low IQ morons or they're people who have a DEI type of agenda. Emergency response coordination has failed repeatedly during recent disasters, leaving citizens stranded. What a debacle in California, for example, with the wildfires. You've got personnel cuts at critical agencies, reducing response capabilities during a heightened threat period. That's more so, we're seeing more so at the county and municipal level, that's driven by politics. Political appointees are overriding career professionals on threat assessments and resource allocations. So that would be somebody like Sebastian Gorka saying to Sarah Adams, a preeminent subject matter expert on radical jihadi terrorists, and saying, you know, Joe Kent, I know that you're the new CTC guy, counterterrorism, but we're going to cancel this meeting with Sarah. You don't need to hear anything she's got to say because we have this under control because we're sending $87 million a week and we're buying peace that way. That's a political appointee screwing things up. You've got communication systems, complete breakdown, federal, state, and local. A great example is the law enforcement agency that I mentioned to you, where the cop goes to his chief and says, look at all of this evidence. And the chief says, well, we're not getting that from up above, so it's got to be bullshit. Can't be real. That's a major breakdown in communications. Budget priorities, you know, they're putting stupid things to the front of the line. I mean, some of these communities spend ungodly amounts of money on alphabet people, alphabet month of June, that kind of crap. And the international coordination has deteriorated big time as well. So we used to, you know, we're part of the Five Eyes, right? The five, you know, intelligence cooperative, for lack of a better term, Great Britain, Canada, the US, New Zealand, Australia. That's broken down as well. So Khalid, I'm going to turn over to you to get the political failures, and then I'm going to kick it into overdrive as we're running long on time. And I want to make sure we get through all 6 segments. So take it away.
Well, let's start from the international point of view and work down to local. When you are trusting the Taliban and Jelani's government to provide you information on terrorism, you've already lost the war. You've already lost the war. I mean, the Taliban is going to tell you how many terrorists they've sent into the US, really? That's really going to happen? Or Jelani's going to tell you how many people he's ethnically cleansed in Syria? Really, that's going to happen? So your break starts there. Your top level, before it was CIA, MI6, French intelligence, German intelligence, all had assets running around the Middle East, picking up information, passing it to their bosses, picking up information, passing it to their bosses. Now those bosses are asking the terrorists, we've heard this is going on in Afghanistan. Is that true? And you expect them to tell you, yeah, that's true. So when your international layer is gone, that means you don't know what's being planned outside the US, which is your biggest source of intelligence. Once you move into the US, well, you've got the federal government, where you have political appointees. You have the Democrats who made sure that Joe Kent had to wait 4 or 5 months to take up NCTC's directorship, because it played better for them to not have him head of counterterrorism. They play games with Tulsi. They play games with everybody in the government. Then you've got Seb Gorka sitting on the other side saying, you know, the best thing we can do is marginalize Afghanistan, because nothing's going to happen from Afghanistan anyway. We're paying them to keep the peace there. So let's just take your focus off of that, Mr. President, and don't even pay attention to what's going on in Afghanistan. Then you've got the FBI staging arrests. They caught a guy coming in from Canada where an FBI agent was talking to him, buying weapons for him, and then they caught him on the border and said, we caught a terrorist. You're doing the same thing the Taliban's doing. Now, where is that information going to flow down to your local level? And I'll give you a really easy one. 4th April, Command 11 on its X handle said there is a credible threat to hospitals and mid-tier cities in the United States. No one paid attention. On the 16th of April, the FBI released a product on their website specifically designed for counterterrorism for healthcare facilities. Were we wrong? Or did we hit something that you didn't want us to hit? You don't want to talk about it because you know you're not ready. You don't know how you're going to fight it. And you're scared to death of how the American public is going to react because they voted for America first and you have not put America first.
Isn't that the truth? I appreciate that, Khalid. So we're going to go right to segment 4, and I'm going to give Randy and Jeff some additional time there just so that we can speed this up a little bit. I do want to quickly share while we're at this point that if you go to survivaldispatch.news, that's our Substack. This is what it looks like. But the video that you see at the top is only when we're broadcasting live. When we're not broadcasting live, it goes away. And directly underneath that, you'll see today's situation report, the sit rep. So if you go to survivaldispatch.news, sign up for free. And our sit reps are the same format every day, Monday through Friday. They look like this. There's a ton of content in here. You get down to my signature, everything below there, these sources are for paying guardians, but there's a ton of value above that. If you're not interested in clicking through all of these sources that we use to put together the situation report, then you'll be just fine without that. So moving into segment number 4 is the constitutional framework for citizen defense. And this was the founder's solution to government failure, whether the failure was incompetence or being overwhelmed or whatever the case may be. You know, the Second Amendment wasn't written for hunting. It was designed exactly for what we're discussing tonight, where there's situations like Jeff said, there is no response. When the shit hits the fan, you're on your own. You're your own first responder. And if you sit there like that Canadian chief of police said, and you just say, well, we'll call 911 and we'll wait for the good guys to show up and save us, you won't survive. You're not going to make it. And God forbid that you are stuck in one of these terrible blue states where they're anti-gun and anti-protection in your home and castle doctrine and stand your ground. But in the South here, our stand your ground law is 3 sentences long. And if you feel that your life is in danger, even if it isn't, then you're authorized to use deadly force. So it's another huge divide in our country, right? So we're not attorneys. We're not giving you legal advice. Check with somebody in your local area for all the laws that relate to you. And even when it comes to Florida, I'm not giving you legal advice. I know what it is because I've consulted my attorneys, but I would encourage you to do that on your own. So again, Second Amendment, it specifically addresses scenarios where government fails to provide you protection. Supreme Court precedents establish individual rights to armed self-defense independent of government permission. People seem to forget that the Constitution starts with we the people. So when other people say to you, well, the Constitution grants you this right or that right. No, it doesn't. The Constitution doesn't grant you any rights whatsoever. The Constitution are the rules that the government is supposed to play inside of and specifies your rights that the government is supposedly can't trample on. Now, have they broken that constitutional framework before? Many times, and shame on them for doing that. But again, people seem to forget the Constitution does not grant you rights. The Constitution lays the sidelines of where the government is allowed to play based on us giving them that power. So this historical understanding of well-regulated militia has been taken all the way to the Supreme Court. You don't have to be in a super organized militia. Any type of citizen defense the Supreme Court has said falls under that during emergencies in particular. As a matter of fact, there's spots of the Constitution, Jeff's welcome to speak to it if he wants, that actually place responsibility on citizens if and when, higher authorities fail. And beyond that, you've got, natural law foundations of self-defense exist regardless of the government capability or inability, whatever the case may be. Then, of course, you have additional state constitutional provisions that support organized defense during legitimate emergencies. There's all kinds of legal frameworks that distinguish between constitutional militia service and illegal paramilitary activity. For example, the old Biden admin took away your right to train with UTM rounds like this. So this is a round that comes with a very small paintball in it, traveling over 400 feet per second. It's got a primer, so it sounds like a regular shot. So you take your pistol or your rifle and you swap out a couple components and you turn it over to one of these. You should be wearing gear when you use these for training. Well, during the old Biden admin, it was against the law for you to buy any UTM products, including these rounds, because that was reserved strictly for military and law enforcement. So they were trying to take your ability away to train, which is complete bullshit, to the point where the Biden DOJ was going to start going after people who specifically train other people, I should say. So I'll get off the soapbox on that. And Randy, I'm going to come to you, and I want to ask you just your thoughts on Supreme Court decisions in recent years have strengthened the legal foundation for citizen defense. And I mean, we can go ad nauseum on this particular topic, but I'm going to stop talking, hand it over to you for a minute to speak with regards to SCOTUS decisions in the past 10 years. The Bruin decision being a big one, right?
Yeah, so I would say recently, in the last couple of years, it seems like we might be getting back on track, right? It's probably luckily because Hillary didn't get elected during 2016, because they definitely would have stacked the court and we would have lost all those rights just through the Supreme Court. And, you look at, it's kind of gone back and forth a little, I think, right? But, for the most part, if we look over our history, the Supreme Court has done a very good job. But as of late, there have been some good decisions, but we all know since, Obama was in office that, and then we got some other liberals on there that they made some kind of hazy decisions. And now we're trying to roll some of that back. I think it's I don't know. It's, to me, the whole judicial system right now is kind of in a whack. And I wish the Supreme Court would do their job on putting down some of these federal judges that keep, even after the ruling they did not too recently of saying that, this was all unconstitutional. Those judges don't have the authority to do that. They keep doing it. And somebody, I think their Supreme Court, right, has some sort of authority over all those judges. Am I correct? They should
Not
do
exactly.
But regardless, they should be able to put them in line. If not, then we need to have them removed from office, so to speak. But
the federal judiciary is a construct of Congress, and they answer directly to Congress. I think it was 1702, Jackson dismantled the entire federal judiciary. You can look it up, and reinvented it the way he felt it should be, because it was highly political and partisan, which is what we're seeing right now. Okay.
Yeah.
So these and they're not elected either, right? They're appointed for life.
Right.
They're political
For life.
appointments. We've got something like 760 of them, something to that effect. But when they say that they're the co-equal branch of government, they absolutely are not. They are not equal to SCOTUS, the legislature, or the executive. They're a construct of Congress. They can be eliminated by Congress in conjunction with the president and reinvented. We've got all kinds of judges that have been appointed that are from places like Trinidad that think that they're more powerful than the president of the United States. And it's just not true. They're gumming up the works, but they're getting overturned at every instance. But let me throw something out here on topic for you, Randy. So the Bruin decision was the biggest Supreme Court decision on guns since Heller, which was 2008. The Bruin decision was a couple years ago. And you had a bunch of states, New York in particular, had this policy of, they said, may issue. We may issue concealed weapons permit. But the only way they would issue you a concealed weapons permit is if you had probable cause. So in other words, you had to say, look, I live in a really dangerous area. We've got all kinds of bears. You know, I need to have a permit to carry a gun with me, sort of thing. But if you couldn't come up with probable cause, they would say, well, no, you're not getting your concealed weapons permit. So Bruin overturned that, which was, you know, absolutely massive. I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not before we move on, but it was a pretty important decision.
Well, I think that, you know, it was a move in the right direction because we know what New York's done, right? Including New York City. All that's unconstitutional. I get why they felt the need that they had to do that. But as time has proven, it's the same thing we've been saying, right? Certainly on when people like, oh, we need gun laws. Well, the only people that pay attention to the laws are the law-abiding citizens, not the criminals. So, you know, whenever they do something, it's really to the law-abiding citizens that have to pay whatever penance that is. It's the same thing we're looking at today. I mean, you know, it's no different than locks or for honest people, right? They're not for the criminals. The lock's not going to stop you. So I think because we've teetered on this gun thing for a long time, and I'm glad they made that decision because you think about it, if we lose our guns, people can say what they want, but they want to take the guns for a reason, and it's not so that crime goes down. And then just what you mentioned, you know, in New York saying, well, we will issue it if you can prove that you have a legitimate reason. Well, okay. Who decides what a legitimate reason is? Of course, if it's a system, you're never getting a gun, right? You're never going to get a gun. So I you know, I probably got lost in that a little bit, but my point is, it's a good thing that we have had some of the decisions we have, because even look at this, you know, when they, the last liberal that was put on I don't remember her name and I apologize. I'm not good with names, but the black lady that's now on the Supreme Court, that when even she went on the Supreme Court, couldn't even define what a woman is.
Katanji.
Yeah. If you can't define what a woman is, you can't be any kind of federal judge. You shouldn't even have an attorney's license.
100%. Couldn't agree more. So before we pivot to you, Jeff, I just want to mention a couple things for people who aren't familiar. 2008, the Heller case, pistols were outlawed for everybody in 1976 in Washington. And in 2008, a cop applied. He wanted to have a pistol in his residence, and he was turned down because of this, you know, regulation / law that was passed in 1976, went all the way to the Supreme Court, and he won. And now people can, you know, exercise their Second Amendment rights in Washington, D.C. and buy pistols. The other SCOTUS decision that applies to all agencies, but ATF included, biggest Supreme Court decision in all of our lifetimes, bar none, the Chevron deference deterrent. So for 40 years, we had this Chevron case going back into the 1980s, 1982, I believe, where what happened is the Supreme Court said, if you go to sue a government agency and the government agency says there's no grounds, they will defer to that government agency and you can't sue them. So in other words, you can only sue a government agency if the agency said it was okay for you to sue them. And the judiciary did it because they said those agencies are the experts. They're the subject matter experts. So we ended up with situations like we had a guy, for example, in Wyoming, a farmer in Wyoming, and there was a parcel of land next to him that was only a couple acres. He had hundreds of acres. And the person had dug a trench on this 2 acres that was flooding one of his fields, and they refused to fix it. They put the piece of property up for sale. He bought the piece of property. He filled the ditch in, dug another ditch to effectively get that water away from his fields. It didn't hurt anybody else the way that he did it. The EPA came along and said, hey, that was a navigable waterway, and we're going to fine you $35,000 a day until you put the ditch back to the way it was. And he said, I'm not doing it. You know, go F yourself sort of thing. So they came back shortly after that and they said, okay, well, we're going to fine you $37,000 a day. They kept raising it incrementally. Well, a whole bunch of other cases got tied together with that, and it went to SCOTUS, and SCOTUS overturned their own decision on Chevron deference, which basically meant that if you have grounds to sue a government agency, they can't stop you. So that radically cut back activities on the part of agencies like the ATF in particular. And there's a gazillion other examples I could give you, but that one's a really easy one. Here's a great example. The ATF, so the NFA, the National Firearms Act, defines a fully automatic machine gun as you pull the trigger once and it dispenses multiple rounds. A forced reset trigger, when you pull the trigger and the bolt carrier comes forwards and slaps the reset lever on an FRT trigger, gives you the illusion of a high cyclic rate. Well, you get a high cyclic rate, but the illusion of being fully automatic, because each time it happens, the bolt carrier pushes your finger forward, and while you maintain constant pressure. Go look at Grand Thumb's videos on it. We can't put it on YouTube because we don't bring millions of followers to YouTube, so we get struck out for that. But Mike, he can put up 3 in a row like he did last month and doesn't get touched. But the ATF said that's a machine gun, and all the attorneys are like, that's not a machine gun. It's not one pull of the trigger. It's multiple pulls. And they said, nope, that's a machine gun. As soon as Chevron deference got passed, guess what? Well, that went out the window, and the bump stocks came back as well. And bump stocks a novelty. It's not really a viable tool, in my opinion. But anyway, moving on from there, I bore you all to death. Jeff, can you give me any historical precedents, like, that guide things right now in legitimate community defense, like being able to actually defend your home, defend your hotel room, defend yourself in your car, all of those sort of things?
Well, there's plenty, but probably the earliest one is Lexington and Concord. Those were citizen militias. The British troops were going to seize their weapons, and so they went to defend their weapons. And that was against a tyrannical government, but it could also be against a riotous mob. But there are countless examples of riots getting into neighborhoods where the people of the neighborhoods banded together and said, don't come this way. Yep. And when they do, bad things happen. The Old West, the wagon trains would circle the wagon trains and defend themselves. They didn't call in the cops to come arrest the Indians. They defended themselves. And that's been going on forever, because for the longest time, there were no telephones, there were no cars. You could, if you contacted the sheriff, you'd have to write a letter or ride a horse to the next town and wait 6 weeks for him to come investigate. Well, you had to take care of business in the meantime. And that's why horse thieves and cattle rustlers were pretty much just hung on the spot. Yeah. And like I told the story about my grandfather seeing a guy getting hung. Guy had raped a child. They caught him. He admitted it. They just strung him up because they said, "Oh, there's no doubt that he did it. He said he did." So they just kind of hung him.
And I can't say that I necessarily disagree with that, to be honest with you.
Don't either.
It works for me. So, Khalid, I'm going to take us into the next segment here just so we can wrap up at a reasonable time, which segment number 5 is practical citizen preparedness. So, we're pivoting from your constitutional rights to real world action. So all of these things laid out in the Constitution don't mean anything unless there's some sort of practical preparation. So we're going to just touch on how Americans that are local to each other can organize effective community defense while authorities are either absent, compromised, or overwhelmed. So we're talking about things like building a neighborhood security network with vetted, like-minded neighbors, who share your values, establishing communication systems that operate independently of government and or commercial controlled infrastructure, training requirements for somebody who's going to be effective in these types of groups, medical training, which we've talked about at length, especially doing stop the bleed, because if the EMTs and paramedics are overwhelmed, how are you going to save other people in your community? training all those people that are in your group. You can call them MAG if you want, mutual assistance group, but supply chain security, which is all about stockpiling stuff for extended emergency situations. We're pretty good at that here in Florida, because when we get smacked with a Cat 4 or Cat 5 hurricane, it takes a long time for life to get back to normal. It takes a long time to get some supplies. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but when we get hit with a hurricane, chickens stop laying eggs and cows stop giving milk. Figuratively speaking, you can buy that stuff to save your life during those times. Coordination protocols, like how do you coordinate with local law enforcement so that they don't see you as the threat if they happen to show up on, SHTF stuff going down. Intelligence gathering. So there's some pretty cool tools out there available. My wife monitors the Ring doorbell stuff like a hawk, and it has provided tremendous intelligence. We live in the safest city in Florida, and it's very unusual for us to have anything going on. They come up from Daytona Beach, we call it Daytona, and occasionally commit crimes here, but it's not really the best spot for them to commit crimes because we've got an awesome local police force, and our sheriff is pretty awesome too. There's a lot of legal considerations for you for, how to defend yourself, depending on your geography. Evacuation planning, which we go through all the time as far as hurricanes are concerned. And I hadn't planned on this, but I'm just going to do this like 2 minutes as fast as I can. CCW Safe doesn't sell you self-defense insurance. And there's a reason after 18 months I chose to go with them for survival dispatch. If you get charged, you're in a citizen-involved shooting, and you have a Soros DA, and you get all the way to the end, and you're innocent, and the DA comes back to your attorney and says, look, cop a plea to this lesser charge, we'll wrap this thing up. 95+% of the time, the attorney's going to say to you, don't gamble going in front of a judge or jury and risk spending 30 years or more behind bars. Take the plea agreement, even though you didn't do it. It's against the law to pay insurance benefits while you're in the course of breaking the law. So the second that you sign that agreement, you now owe your insurance, self-defense insurance company, approximately $400,000 on average to defend you in a criminal case. You just lost your representation for the civil case that always follows afterwards. And the vast majority of these companies don't provide anything as far as an award that maybe is given against you. So when you go to CCW Safe, their top of the line package is $47 a month, but it includes your spouse. So it's $23.50 a piece, and you automatically get $1 million in coverage. So if you get a civil judgment against you for $1 million, CCW Safe pays it out. They're the only self-defense company out there that have a quick deployment team. Let's say 1 o'clock in the morning, you're involved in this thing. Your first call is to 911. The second one is to CCW Safe. It rings every single employee's phone in the middle of the night until somebody answers it. And within hours, they have people on their way to you, attorneys, cops who know how the system works, all that sort of stuff. So shameless plug for CCW Safe. We do not get affiliate commission from them. They give us a monthly stipend, which we're thankful for, defer payments. There's a link down below. If you use that, please use that, because it tells them that you got the lead from us. But if you have self-defense insurance, it ain't worth the paper that it's written on. And if you go ahead and spend the time to dig through it, you'll find something called a recoupment clause, and multiple people have been burned by this. So that's my PSA on that particular topic. So
hey, one last thing though, Chris, didn't you say though, they also, because most likely if you have to shoot someone, right, and law enforcement shows up, they're taking your weapons.
Yep, that's
correct.
Correct. Yes.
And did you say CCW will bring you a weapon?
Not only that, good point. Thank you for bringing that up, Randy. Not only in that scenario, but these ridiculous red flag laws. So Pam Bondi is why we have a red flag law in Florida. She's a piece of work. So Randy, like, let's say, your ex-wife, ex-girlfriend says, I'm worried about Randy. He's got PTSD, he's a Green Beret, and they come and seize your guns until they decide that you're innocent. If that happens and you're with CCW Safe, they will make sure that they get replacement weapons to you so that you can defend yourself.
Yep.
So good catch. Thank you. I appreciate that, Randy, very much. So Khalid, moving on to this here, give us an idea of the most critical skills citizens need to develop to, come to some sort of effective community defense groups. And then when you run through on this, I'm going to give one question to Randy, one question to Jeff, and we can move into the final segment. It's all you.
Well, look, we've talked about this a number of times in previous episodes about mutual assistance groups and how you vet your mutual assistance groups. I am a firm believer in setting parameters. So like if my house is here, I'm going to look 2 miles out as far as my walkie-talkie will work outside of the network, outside of a cell network. If my walkie-talkie works 2 miles out, then I'm going to be looking for people out 2 miles out. And I'm going to tell them to buy the same walkie-talkie and go 2 miles out from there, so that you have rings of defense. That's literally what you're talking about. Is when you're looking at an SHTF situation, you need layers of defense. So if someone crosses layer 1, someone needs to be able to put an alert out to the other layers that we've had suspicious vehicle enter the area. And that vehicle looks like this. It's got this license plate number. It's got this many people inside of it. That alert goes out to everybody. Everyone who needs to be armed gets armed, takes up positions in their own neighborhoods. So no matter which side that vehicle goes to, everyone's ready for it. Number 2, make sure whoever has a weapon in their hand is trained, licensed, and certified. Because if you have somebody who's never fired a weapon before and picks up a weapon and starts shooting, they're going to kill innocent people and not the people you're trying to defend yourself from. Number 3, communication methods. Because we operate in the field quite often, we have our own code books. We have a developed code book that everyone on a walkie-talkie has a copy of that code book. They understand if you use a certain phrase, what it means. If you use a certain code, what it means. Those things have to be laid out beforehand. Those things are then communicated to your local police. You sit down with your sheriff's department, you sit down with your local police, and you tell them, this is how we've developed a security system for our area. Lay a map down in front of them. Say, look, these are our security points. These are where people are going to be contacting in. If you enter in this area in a non-official vehicle, you need to make sure you switch over and you have this walkie-talkie with you. These are the code words we use. But that's assuming that there is a police department left after the attack happens, because one of your first targets is going to be your police department. So you've got to build from the idea of understanding that there is no such thing as a police force to defend you. You've got to be working from that understanding that you're going to defend yourselves. And when you think that way, it's a lot easier. Now, I stay away from mesh and ham radio for a specific reason. Number 1, not everyone has the dinero to go out and buy a ham radio system for themselves. So if you buy a walkie-talkie, it's affordable. It's affordable for everyone. $100, $150, $200, that's affordable for everybody. You go around, and if whoever can't afford to buy one, you do a little donation system, and they buy one for that location, because you're securing a neighborhood. Keep your mentality around you from now. Start going through and building your network now, because we're looking end of November all the way through the end of February. This could kick off at any point in time in that range. That is Christmas shopping time. There is a high probability you will be in a shopping mall when this kicks off. And then what do? You need to be thinking from that point of view from right now.
Just on the ham radio side, I had a quick look. Two UV5Rs, and I'm not a huge fan of Baofeng, although I do have one sitting around here that, I'll be honest, is the best performing ham radio I've ever seen under $300, the Baofeng UV25, and it's closer to $90. But for $44 on Amazon, you can get 2 Baofeng UV5Rs. Pretty cheap to get a ham radio that also does all the GMRS and FRS stuff as well. So I actually good pivot there, because Randy, as I've mentioned before, when you were a Green Beret, there are times you served in your squad as the Echo, the comms expert. So question for you on this is what communication and coordination tools work best, say, for a mutual assistance group, citizen defense group, whatever you want to call it.
Well, for civilians, typically what we've seen is, even walkie-talkie, something that's got a couple of miles on it. But if you're talking beyond that, we're talking about what the ham radios, but the little things that you've got, the little mini, all those things are going to work as long as there's power and the networks are up, right? What happens if all that's down? Then, I think ham radios, right, as long as you got power. Now, it doesn't need a whole lot of power, so you may even have a little generator. You could run a radio. And the thing is, then you are able to get out and communicate, because no matter what happens, generally there will be some sort of announcements afterwards by radio on some frequencies. There's emergency frequencies and there's some other stuff. We can assume that even after this happens, that there will be something like that. And if there's not, because the system's down, you're still going to have groups of people, right? And people with radios that will be putting out information. So I would get something, and I don't have anything offhand to talk about or give you direct manufacturers like what you just did. But any of the radios that are going to work with the least amount of power or no power, or don't have to have a cell phone or a satellite network to connect, that's what's going to work. That's all that's going to work after that. Because I do believe if something like this big enough kicked off, they may, even if they don't take out the power grid, which we have credible information that it will happen. I don't know now. I think Jeff said some back time that, because what I was always understanding of when it comes to satellites, right? All satellite is owned by the military. And so at some point they have sold and rented some of that off. But to my understanding, if we really, like, say we had a civil war here, they're going to shut that down. You won't be able to access anything satellite. Now, I don't know, that could have changed over the last few years, but I know when I was still on active duty, that was the case. You're not going to be able to connect. So again, go to something that doesn't need cell phone or satellite networks to be up to work. Radios work just like CBs, right? And trucks back in the day. I don't think they use them as much anymore. The truckers don't use CBs as much as they did now that everybody's got an Apple phone or whatever smartphone. But your CB radios are another radio, because all that is working off a little bit of power. And then it's just whatever frequency you're tuned into. So you can just roll them through them to see if there's any information out there. Or you can also transmit and try to, do a radio check with other people to find out where others are. I think that would be the only way if the actual system went down, because again, everything we use, including these phones, work off that network. And when it goes down, we all know this thing's a paperweight. That's really all it is at that point. So,
yeah, I appreciate that, Randy. Just because I've spent a ton of time on citizen comms, number one, the Iridium satellite network is not owned by the government or the military. And Starlink, of course, is owned by.
That's right. Yeah. Starlink is what I was trying to think. Yeah.
So, and Starlink is great, by the way. You can turn the service off and on when you want it, when you need it. You can travel around with it. It's our backup. I have a Gig-E fiber connect, so it's 1,000 Mbit up and down. But some other things on the comms. What you see on the radios for their range is not the real range, unless you live somewhere like California that has the largest repeater network in the entire world. And it's all built by radio enthusiasts. So if you're in the Southeast here, for example, without any significant elevation changes like Florida, I'm telling you straight up that you're going to be really lucky with a UHF radio, ham radio, to get about 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles. It won't penetrate stuff. I would highly recommend, I hate to be the stick in the mud here, but I would highly recommend don't get walkie-talkies. All of the walkie-talkies, number one, have fixed antennas. The wattage means virtually nothing compared to the antenna. The antenna is everything for how far you can communicate, number one. Number two, all of those walkie-talkies that you buy for a song and a dance at Walmart, they're all on the FRS, which is the family radio band. and you're going to have zero ability to talk cleanly on a channel. There's no encryption, there's no channel hopping, and it's going to be completely saturated. So if it's a true SHTF event, I would recommend against getting anything like that. Ham radios, technically, per the FCC, if it's an emergency situation, I don't care what the sad hams say, because some asshole is going to chime in who's a purist on a ham radio basis. You do not need a license to operate a ham radio. If you were in danger, if it's an emergency, it doesn't have to be a declared emergency. So the sad hams are basically guys who are diehard ham radio guys who, you know, these are the guys who were the hall monitors in high school and used to get stuffed in lockers, and they got nothing better to do than complain about shit like that from their mother's basement. But anyway, comms wise, I'll get off this quickly and pivot to Jeff, but the Garmin InReach Mini 2 is the current mini version. It's small. You tether it to your phone. If you have it and your other family members have it, doesn't matter what network goes down, because it's going straight up to Iridium and coming straight back down to that particular user. It's not traversing other networks. If you want to get any type of security, you're looking at business class licenses. So it's about $500 when you pay somebody to look after that for you, like buy2aradios.com, for example. You're not going to get enhanced range. I have Motorola's. I have a business class license. I have 5 dedicated frequencies for a 50-mile radius here for our team. It doesn't go any further than a ham radio, a GMRS radio, but it has channel hopping, so it'll do 3 channels every second. The ones like Randy's used to using, the Harris radios, they can channel flip up to 100 times per second. That's why they're $18,000, $19,000, $20,000. The security's wicked. They got tons of encryption. The business class Motorola's we have that as well. But if you need to get farther than that, your choices are you can buy the mic style radios that traverse the LTE network, which is long-term evolution. It's a very low bandwidth relative to 5G, 6G, etc. The juice isn't worth the squeeze for the bad guys to take down all the LTE towers. So there's a pretty good chance that for $20, $25 a year in one of these, you can communicate worldwide with people that you're paired up with at no long distance, no additional charge fees. We've got some new ones coming next week that I'll tell you what they look like from POC Link. And, you know, the next choice after that, if you're radio based, you're going to have to get into something like shortwave radio, high frequency. And now you're going to start spending some money. You're going to spend $1,000 on an entry level mobile or base station. The good ones are $3,000. Plus you have to have an accompanying antenna with it. The antenna is everything. So apologies for being long-winded.
Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news though, Chris, but the reality is, you know, even when before I was in special operations and I was an infantry grunt, we had Singars radios, and these things are not cheap either. They're thousands of dollars, and they are badass radios. But guess what? We still had to run a retrans guy out all the time to be able to keep up with the companies at the battalion level or the companies back to the battalion level, because as you're moving along, you just run, as you said, you only get so far without all those repeaters. So that's just a fact. You know what I mean? And when it happens, most of us are not going to have the radios that we need to be able to actually communicate.
Absolutely. And here's a rhetorical question for you. So even in California, where you have this private network of repeaters, which is badass. I mean, I know guys with, you know, a regular handset bouncing off repeaters and talking to people hundreds of miles away in California. But if the grid goes down, what's keeping the power up to all those repeaters?
Nothing.
You know, some of them have solar, but for the most part, they're going down as well. We have virtually no repeaters here in Florida in the Southeast compared to California. I would not rely on a repeater network myself either at all. So anyway, apologies for the comm stuff. It's kind of a personal thing for me. I come from high tech. I'm a tech guy, and I like stuff like that. So Jeff, apologies again, but what are the biggest mistakes you see in current preparedness efforts made by citizens for all of this SHTF stuff? And then the last segment is really, really short, and we'll put a lid on this thing. You're on mute, Jeff.
Mute.
I think the biggest thing is people who assume that utilities are going to be functioning.
Yeah.
They may, but they may not. You may lose water, you may lose power, you may lose, and if you lose power, you lose your natural gas because it depends on compressors.
Yeah.
And even if you've got Starlink Starlink to connect to the internet needs a ground station. If the ground station doesn't have power, you don't have Starlink.
Yeah.
So, yeah, be prepared to go it alone.
Yeah, but coming from high tech, those types of centers typically have contingencies with gas generators, and I mean natural gas or propane generators.
But if the
Natural
grid
gas
goes
is kind
down,
of iffy.
the natural gas grid goes down because they require compressors.
Well, even worse, the problem with natural gas is that I've seen situations. So there was a fire, Long Island substation, early 2000s, caught on fire, took out power to the entire Northeast and Canada as well in that part of the hemisphere. And we had people who had data centers in the affected area that were on natural gas generators, and they failed because the pressure wasn't high enough to keep them fired up. So, propane's a good option, but it's an expensive option. Natural gas is too, to keep a data center going, but there's at least something there. Anyway, moving on from there into this final segment, let me get my notes pulled back up again. Apologies for running long tonight. So the message here at the end is essentially the time for you to prepare is now if you haven't already started that. There's all kinds of systemic failure across all of these institutions that we've discussed at length, which I'm not going to go deep into. The intel is solid. Khalid has boots on the ground in Afghanistan that have penetrated these terrorist organizations. It's why they try to kill them at least once a week, and that's not an exaggeration. It just happened to him again the other night ago, and I'm not going to go into details, but he was in a safe house, and thank God he's got a good protective detail looking after him. Beyond that, it really boils down to you have no first responders coming. You are your own first responder. Get to know your neighbors. I know it's a foreign concept. We used to do it in my younger years, but it's now foreign. But get to know your neighbors at the very least, to have some sort of group. There's strength in numbers. And, other than that, I'm going to give everybody a chance. Final say. We'll do the conflicted question and go from there. So, Khalid, your final thoughts on tonight's episode.
Well, look, we've given you a lot of great tips from this episode and from previous episodes as well. It's all on you. I mean, we can't force you to do anything. I mean, this is your decision and your decision for your family. If you're going to make the decision, start working now, because you're already behind schedule. To be very honest, you're already behind schedule. Start working now. Start moving forward. Start getting things done, because I told you the time frame we're looking at, end of November to the end of February 2026. That's not a lot of time. You're talking 2-3 months at the most. And to put all this stuff together, to vet people, you don't have a lot of time. So my advice is, if you're serious and you understand what we're telling you and you really want to make sure you're safe, start working from now.
Good advice, Khalid. Thank you. Randy, final words on tonight's topic?
Well, I like what Khalid said. People, what you have to realize is, because somebody asked this, one of the women way back, asked, well, should I deal with it now or should I? Listen, if this thing kicks off and you're not in the middle of it, don't get in the middle of it.
Yeah.
If you're in the middle of it and you can escape and get out, there's nothing cowardly about that. Get out, get away. But if you're right there in the moment, you could do something about it. Maybe that's when you do something about it. But what I would recommend is, because as Khalid mentioned, man, we don't have a lot of time left. If you didn't already fully prepare for this, you can only prepare so much between then. But, like Chris said, get out and know your neighbors. I definitely would find out who are the veterans in your neighborhood. Where are those guys and gals? Where are all those people? Because at the end of the day, this thing kicks off. You may not have to do anything for a couple of days, right? But there may be a call where some people may have to go out and help end this and make sure your community is safe. So I would prepare for that. And, buy plenty of food, buy plenty of bullets, plenty of water.
Would you recommend Carnival by any chance?
Oh, absolutely. I just got one of my shipments today. So I got on the monthly plan. I've already got probably 6 of those in the back, and I won't go. I've got a whole bunch of other stuff, but I am definitely putting Carnival in there because what I got doesn't compare to that.
I'll speak to it a little bit more before we wrap up, but I want to get Jeff's thoughts here on tonight's episode.
Well, I would just echo what Colin said. If you're going to do it now. You don't go out and buy a generator as the hurricane's ripping the roof off your house.
Yeah, I would tell people go to survivaldispatch.news. You don't need to sign up even to read a bunch of the material that's on our Substack. We have a ton of free information there. If you sign up, of course, we appreciate that very much. All right, so now that we're at the end, we're going to pivot first to the hero of the day. So let me pull that up here. And it's the very famous Chuck Yeager. So I want to say this was 2014, if memory serves me right. He was 89 years old. Yeah, October 14th, 2012. F-15 Eagle, 89 years old. Final flight as a pilot, of course, broke the sound barrier. Because we're running a little bit long on time, I already sent this in all of the chats if you want to read up on that. The next order of business is the Guardian story of the day. So this is again from Dale. He's our prolific news poster in our Signal Guardian chat, which is pretty badass. And I'm going to play this one. I just put it in the chats as well, but this is happening by design. 39 seconds.
This building behind me is 800 years old. The ground that I'm stood on has been Christian for 1300 years. Our ancestors before us have protected this sacred land. And look what is happening to our country. It is now our time to protect our ground and our heritage. The mainstream media will turn a blind eye, try and convince us, gaslight us into thinking that, no, this is not the way. But I tell you what, Christ is king and Christ will always be the way.
So amen to that. I don't know that Britain can turn this thing around, to be honest with you, but I won't take us down that rabbit hole tonight. I think they might be too far gone. So the conflicted question, you run into someone who in the past made some personal sacrifices in order to help you get on your feet during a financial struggle. Now society is completely collapsed and he comes to your door begging for help. To give him the bare minimum that he needs, your resources would be depleted by 50%, and you don't know if and when you'll be able to replenish your supplies. Would you be able to do for him what he did for you by giving him half of your supplies? So Jeff, I'm going to go to you first on this one.
Probably not, just because, if I have 100 pounds of food and his bare minimum is 50, that means my family starves. So, I may give him some, get him through the day, get him through a couple of days. If he says, I need 50 pounds and you've got 100, give me half of it, that ain't happening. I'll help him as best I can, but I'm not going to sacrifice my family to help someone who didn't prepare.
Fair enough. Randy, your thoughts?
I was thinking the same thing. You know what I mean? I understand that he helped me during a bad financial situation, but this is a completely different than just a solely financial situation. And then he probably didn't give me half of everything he had, right? Certainly when there's no way to get it back. So I'm definitely not giving him 50%. I'd probably offer if he wanted to stay with us to help out, become part of the team, and I'm going to give him something, right? But it's definitely not going to be half of what I got. That can't be. It won't happen. Unfortunately, if he thinks I'm not returning the favor, that's on him because this is a completely different situation. But I would, there's no way that I could give up half of everything we had. Not in this type of situation. Not in this type of situation.
Right. Yeah, gotcha. Khalid, your thoughts?
I'm with Randy on this one. If this was normal life and you came to me and said, I need help, yeah, I'd repay the favor you gave me. But when the world is ended and supplies are limited and you don't know where you're going to get, extra supplies from, yeah, I can give you a couple of days worth of food to keep your family fed. But I'm sorry, I can't repay a favor when you did that in normal life. This is a different situation. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that one.
Fair enough. So I subscribe to the Keith Graves line of thinking here, and we have stuff set aside for charity purposes. So nobody knows what we have stacked up, period. Nobody knows but my wife and I. So nobody knows what 50% of our preps are.
Well,
so
fair enough.
When we
fair enough.
When we say, here you go. We have a package that we've put together for people in need. That's what they're going to get. And I got to give 100% credit to Keith Graves for coming up with that. I mean, it's the right thing to do. It's the Christian thing to do. And, you know, Keith leads by example doing a lot of this stuff. So that's it for that. By the way, you guys, you know, I have like this thing for flashlights, right? So Ace Beam, check this out, sent me this new one. I think it's called the W10. It's an LEP flashlight. What that means is it's like a super concentrated spotlight. And you can, I shine this thing down our road 1/4 of a mile, and it's just like the Batman light out of it. They're feeding my, you know, addiction to flashlights. So they actually sent two, they sent 2 of them. They sent me in 2 different colors. So when the guy shows up and he needs food and stuff, I will have the charity package for him, but don't touch my flashlights.
You're not getting the flashlight, buddy.
I don't give him my flashlight. I shit you not right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I got 12 within 18 inches right now. That doesn't include the rest of my collection. So we all have our addictions, right? I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I do flashlights. So,
well, you see, Chris wasn't ever in the military. I told him a story once. I was the guy that had extra flashlights. No joke. In my bag, there was quite a few. And one time our command sergeant major, for whatever reason, I don't know, he just comes into where we were at, and he comes over and says, "Hey, Nance, I need a flashlight." And I'm thinking, do I give him a flashlight? Which of course I did, because he was the command sergeant major, but I knew, and of course I was right, I never got that flashlight back.
Yeah. So just so you know, I'm not exaggerating. This is one of my favorite Ace Beams. This is another one of my favorite Ace Beams, and it's long, so you can stack up 2 batteries. It's got a really bright light in it, but what's really cool is they come with these rubber things, white or orange, you know, a safety deal like that. I got the 2 that I showed you, like the LEPs. I got another one here that also has built-in UV light. Olight just sent me this one, which is very similar to that one. This one's straight up UV light. This guy's a magnetic jobby that you can sit wherever you want. This one, you can put it technically in the back of your phone, and it folds out like this. And you can either do it sticky or magnet. This is a really decent one from Ace Beam. This is another really decent one from Ace Beam. This is one that Woobin sent to me to have a look at. They're decent. They're not at the level of the Ace Beam. The Ace Beams are the best flashlights, bar none. So anyway,
like Chris is sitting on a chair made out of flashlights. That's exactly.
I'm not even covering the stuff that's out of reach. There's a bunch of flash. They sent me an 80,000 lumen flashlight that is insane. There's a couple others that are rated close, but they run for like 3 seconds and then they knock it down because the heat's so extreme. My desk has a marble top on it. I took that Ace Beam one, 80,000 candle power, or pardon me, 80,000 lumens, I should say. And so I'm in the midst of making a note, and I took it and I set it on my desk beside me, blind in my left eye. All of a sudden I see the smoke going in front of my face. I'm like, what the F is that? And I look over and I pick it up, and it had melted the seal on top of the marble.
Oh, boy.
So anyway, that's Chris Evan for you right there. But we're done for tonight. Appreciate everybody out there who's a Survival Dispatch Guardian, survivaldispatch.news. Appreciate all of our sponsors, especially our premier sponsor, Carnival. Stay tuned for Dead Drop with Mike Glover and company coming imminently. Khalid, I think we've picked up, I kid you not, about 40 followers on Dead Drop since we started. There's no material there yet.
That's crazy.
So I think it's going to be a home run. Tomorrow night, episode number 21 out of 144. It's basically grid down America. Now what? That's it. Between now and then, please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America, and enjoy the closing video.
Forgiveness. We pray tell us we're wrong. We pray for mercy, we pray for love. We ask, we plead for help from above. They try so hard to convince us, they prop up the garbage, they sell us their lies. They hate guns but love their abortions. They cheat and they steal and they're doing it now. We pray for mercy, we pray for love.